Hello, and welcome to Badger Talks Live, which brings exciting happenings, resources, and talent from your UW flagship campus to the people of Wisconsin and beyond. My name is Nina Bowles, and I'm a junior from Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, currently studying creative writing and social welfare at the UW-Madison College of Letters and Science. Today, it is my pleasure to introduce Wisconsin Public Radio personality, Charles Monroe-Kane. He will be talking about his new podcast today. It's called Bookmarks, and in the Bookmarks podcast, established authors share stories about books that have made a life-changing impact on them, the books that have left an impression. I've been listening to the Bookmarks podcast, and I think that there's something really special about being able to hear from authors, people whose job it is to write for a living, getting to hear from them about the books that have left such a mark on them that they haven't been able to forget the details, or, like the books that have perhaps influenced their own work as writers. But also, for me, this pandemic has been a bit of an isolating experience, but listening to Bookmarks has sort of reminded me that literature has this incredible power to help us connect and relate to one another. I think that books can help bring us closer to empathy, even though we can't see each other face to face. And I think that that's something that we really need right now. Bookmarks helps to remind us of that. Charles Monroe-Kane is a longtime senior producer and interviewer of WPRs to the best of our knowledge, as well as the author of Lithium Jesus, a Memoir of Mania. He has spent almost a decade in Europe, where he started an internet cafe in Prague, managed a record label in Amsterdam, and even ran a circus. Please welcome Charles Monroe-Kane.
Yay. Thank you, Nina. Thank you very much. Hi, everybody. This is such a strange format. I can't see anyone. I normally get a lot of energy and feed off of other people when I give a presentation, which is why for me the pandemic has been so hard. It's funny, Nina and I were on right before this, we're talking about learning under the pandemic and what's going to happen in the fall. Of course, I was negative. I'm old. And like, oh, this is going to be tough, whatever. She was completely optimistic. And she said it would be nice to be able to watch lectures at your pace, to study differently. So you should always remember to listen to the students and not to us. Quick comment, I think I wanted people to understand this. Years ago, when I first started working on To the Best of Our Knowledge, I heard that university people at the state were being furloughed. This is a couple governors ago. Were being furloughed, and I said, oh, okay, that's too bad, sorry. And then I told I was getting furloughed. I had no idea, or I guess I had some idea that I didn't realize I worked for the state. And then even though I'm on campus, I hadn't fully realized I worked for the university. So I want to give you a path of how just To Best of Our Knowledge is a part of what all y'all do at the university. So as a lot of us, there's a distributor we have called PRX. PRX is part of this umbrella, public radio, an amazing organization. We're distributed by them, but we're produced at Wisconsin Public Radio, which is amazing because Wisconsin Public Radio is on campus. Actually, it's in the communications building in Vilas Hall, integral part of Wisconsin life, and certainly a university life, and Best for Knowledge is a part of that. And I'll be honest, I didn't actually fully understand that when I started working here. I find it an honor to be a part of the university. So thank you, university, for inviting me. And thank you, Fran, Nick, and Nina, and everybody who's helped me get ready for this. So let me back up. Before we talk about Bookmarks, Nina, thank you for talking about how cool it was. Before we talk about the actual podcast that we have coming up, I want to make sure I understand who we are, the we that's making this, and that we is To the Best of Our Knowledge. It is let me have a drink here. It is a Peabody Award-winning radio program, national show on about 220 NPR stations around the country. Been around forever, I think. We just had our 30th anniversary. I haven't. But the show itself has had a 30th anniversary. And what do? Well, we do a show. We do a show that's kind of big think stuff. We interview people, prime ministers, presidents, famous people, poet laureates, bestsellers. We also talk to normal people, morticians. I talked to a drone pilot, which was actually really interesting. I talked to a snake handler in Kentucky, which is also a fascinating person to talk to. And we put all those together and make a radio program out of it. What's I think important about us compared to other radio shows is that, to best of our knowledge, is not live. So we have this luxury of interviewing a seismologist, and then for an hour, and editing down to 15 minutes, adding music and kind of making it what we want it to be, which is exciting because it lets us really snap some things together so they can make sense for listeners. Because the biggest thing we do is we do our show on themes. Any theme you could think of, and we kind of come at it different ways, which would be hard to do, of course, live. I'll give you some examples. I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago. We did a show on how music affects your brain. It was actually very, very powerful program. This weekend we just had was a show on jazz in Africa. And the people who made the show actually went to Africa to do the recordings. If you get a chance to hear it, it's incredible music, incredible interviews inside of it. A couple of weeks ago, I did a show I called Breaking the Chains, and it was a show about prison reform. Everybody's talking about police reform in the country, as they should be, and I'm sure will continue to. But we wanted to look at another part of the justice system and did a whole show on that. Like I said, and inside of it, we talked to people who are reformers, we talked to people who are abolitionists, and we talked to people who realize that the problem in America is that we fear Black men, and what that means, all tied into prison. I want to play real quick, if you don't mind. It'll only be for a few minutes. I want to play, it's a bookmark, which we'll talk about in a second, but it's a bookmark from the show, Breaking the Chain. That's where you get an idea of what it is these bookmarks are as a part of our show. So, Nick, could you play that first bookmark? It's Malcolm Gladwell.
Code 1 is 841.
And maybe he's not.
Hi, my name is Malcolm Gladwell. I am the host of the Vision
I'll
History
talk for a
Podcast.
second while Nick gets
Malcolm
it up there.
Gladwell has made
the
a
ideas that
career
we have
out of
these
challenging conventional
bookmarks,
wisdom.
these 3 to 4 minute.
He's an intellectual iconoclast, author of The Tipping Point and Outliers. And he says there's one book that changed the way he thinks about criminal justice. A book that digs deep into racism and police brutality.
Supposed to be a male sitting on a swing.
Welcome to Bookmarks.
Black male, green shirt, blue pants.
The book I would like to recommend is a book by a criminologist named Frank Zimring called When Police Kill, which is very much timely. I ran across it. It was one of these, I don't know, I hope it sells many hundreds of thousands of copies now. But at the time, it was a kind of a book by an academic. And he basically systematically tried to figure out how many people die at the hands of police in the United States, how does that compare to other countries, and why? Why do so many people die at the hands of police in the United States?
A gray jacket with black sleeves. Black sleeves, gray pants.
It's completely dispassionate. It is not a work of advocacy. It's a work of analysis. And he walks you through, it's just this kind of education in this problem. He's an older man. He's been one of the leading criminologists in the world for decades. He's written many books, many of which I've read, and I've always come away from reading his books profoundly smarter than I was before I started. So he wrote a book about New York, about the crime drop in New York, called The City That Became Safe, which is just brilliant. He just has a way of thinking about and understanding the roots of complex social phenomena, particularly crime.
1910 West Boulevard.
I'm going to read you a couple of titles of the books he's written over the years. The Scale of Imprisonment. That's from 1991, trying to figure out why are there so many people in American jails. American Capital Punishment, right? The Contradictions of American Capital Punishment. That's from 2003. American Youth Violence from 1998. So he's been thinking about this for decades now.
It was marked by the youth center.
Anyway, I read that book in 2017 when I was thinking about writing this book, my book, Talking to Strangers, and I hadn't figured out how I was going to write it. And Frank Zimring's book just comes out in the middle of that wave of cases. I chose one, Sandra Bland, for my book. And it just made me understand what was going on. And it radicalized me in a really profound way.
1910. Black male, green shirt.
This is not a kind of aberration. This is not about a few bad apples. This is about something systemic that's gone wrong in our society. And Frank Zimring was there thinking about this in a profound found way long before almost everyone else.
223, are you 10-4? 9-1, 10-4. Jump to the suspect.
Malcolm Gladwell recommends When Police Kill by criminologist Frank Zimring. Gladwell hosts the podcast Revisionist History, and you can read an in-depth conversation with him on our website at ttbook.org.
You grab my taser.
PRX.
So, what do you think of that? I mean, it's pretty cool. I mean, and let me tell you how that's done. Malcolm Gladwell's got a new book out. He's on tour. We want to interview him for the book. We're not 100% sure when that interview is going to air, because like I said earlier, we do our show on themes. We interview him about the book. And then beforehand, we're like, hey, Malcolm, we do this thing called Bookmarks, where we ask people what their favorite book is. Talk for like 3 or 4 minutes, introduce yourself, and there you go. And that's exactly what you just heard. Hi, my name is Malcolm Gladwell. Boom. And of course, that would be Malcolm Gladwell's favorite book, wouldn't it? It's quite the book. But that's kind of the idea of it. So what happened over the last year or so, 6 months, is that a number of people's favorite books were books they read when they were a child. That was on the theme. And we kept them together. They're pretty amazing, actually. And we kept them together and said, let's make a special season of our podcast. Right now, we've had 2 seasons of the podcast, just general bookmarks, 13 weeks here, 13 weeks there of our podcast. But we thought, wow, there's these amazing books where people are talking about their childhood favorite books. Let's do a special podcast series, which is going to be coming up soon, and let's just have people talk about their books as a child. So that's what we did. And I want to stop for a moment to make you understand the logic here, right? For someone, you're all smart people out there, so you can imagine this. You're Alice Walker, right? You're Alice Walker. We're interviewing about your new book of poetry. You send an email to Alice Walker saying, hey, or Alice Walker's publicist, say, hey, we want to do this bookmark as well at the end. Nobody minds, right? Alice Walker's not going to mind talking for 3 minutes about her favorite book or a book that left a mark on her. Why would she mind, right? And no one minds. And that's why we had to do so many of these, because we're doing the interview anyway. Everyone loves to talk about their favorite books. As you probably heard in there, we take the interviewer out, we add some music and kind of make it special. So that's what we do. I want to play one real quick, because I now want to play one that's on the theme of books we read as a child. And I think you'll hear the difference. This is novelist Anne Lamott. Nick, can you play the lovely podcast?
What's the very first book that changed your life? Forever.
This is Anne Lamott, and a book that changed my life forever was Pippi Longstockings. I was an early reader and found literal salvation in chapter books. The first one I remember was Pippi Longstockings, about this little Swedish girl with braids that stuck straight out, one black sock and one brown sock, and a horse that lived with her, and a monkey whose name I think was Mr. Nilsson. And her father was the king of a cannibal island. He had floated off somewhere. I don't remember if we know what happened to her mother, but she lived alone next to slightly priggish Swedish girls, whose names I think are Tommy and Annika. And she radicalizes them. She gets them to do things that are way scarier than I would ever do. She teaches them to go a little farther beyond their garden than they've ever gone before. She makes them laugh. Sometimes she just picks up her horse and carries him out to the front porch for a little fresh air. And when I read that book, I thought, there's a place in this world for me, for odd, strange, strong me. And I thank the author every few days. We had this one funky little window seat, or what we called a window seat, which was kind of a very, very small space jammed up against a window. And that was my safety spot. That was if I was there, and if you were reading, you could get away with it. You know, if you were sitting at the kitchen table trying to figure out all of life because you'd just been hanging out with like Catholics or some other strange family, a grown-up would come along and say, don't you have something to do? Don't you have homework? Or is your room clean? But if you had a book in your hands, they'd come by and smile at you. And I remember the cover. I remember those braids and those freckles and that goofy skirt and that one long black knee sock and one long brown knee sock. She was always making pancakes and flipping them, and they got stuck on the ceiling all the time. She was like Ruth Gordon in Harold and Maude, you know, and Harold and Maude was a movie that changed my life forever. Forever. I had this kinky, short, nappy, whitish blonde hair, so I couldn't do the braids. And other girls would do the braids for Halloween. They put wire in their braids. So, of course, I was completely bitter and jealous about that. But, you know, we didn't have enough money ever. And so sometimes my socks would kind of not match. They'd be the same color, but they wouldn't be from the same pair. One does what one can.
We all loved Pippi Longstocking, but maybe not quite as much as Anne Lamott. Bookmarks are brought to you by To the Best of Our Knowledge. I'm Anne Strangechamps, and if there's a book that left a mark on you, tell us about it at ttbook.org/bookmarks.
PRX.
All right, so you owe me one because you just heard Anne Lamott review Pippi Longstocking. I mean, that is so endearing. I love that. I love it, love it, love it, love it, love it. And we got a lot of responses that are on that level. Just people. There's this woman, Bettina Gappa. I forgot. I can't remember what country she's from now. Anyway, and she did this amazing bookmark where she talked about Jane Austen, and she talked about how Jane Austen, some of her novels were African and how African they were compared to other novels. And I'm like, what? Jane Austen is as an African writer. And it's just amazing what people think about and come up with and do. I will say to you that, you know, someone like Anne Lamott, I think she could have whipped that out. I think she may have just done that one take. Just like, boom, that's it. We added music. Because, I mean, she loves that book. Clearly, it's beautiful. Now, that was Anne Strangechamps you probably heard. You know, probably everybody knows Anne. She's the host of To the Best for Knowledge. She's the one that kind of did the intro and outro. We do that so that the bookmark could be completely self-contained. So you can just, here it is. You don't need anything else to know, just that it's self-contained. But she said something at the end that I want to say to you right now. She basically said, if you have a bookmark or a recommendation, to email it to us. So we're going to be here for a little bit today. I can see the chats that you guys are sending up. Why not tell me what your favorite childhood book was, and a sentence why, and I can read it. We can talk. I can talk about it. My understanding is we have a 20-second delay, so it'll be pretty hard for me to communicate you directly. But I would love if you guys started doing that. And every time one comes up, I'll just stop. We can talk about it. For example, Mark in Madison says his favorite book, or a book that left a mark on him, was King of a Cannibal Island. Okay, I'm going to be honest. I've never heard of King of a Cannibal Island. Mark, if you could type in for us why King of a Cannibal Island was a powerful book for you when you were a child, we can talk about that. And like I said, I really encourage people to do this, unless you want to hear me talk nonstop for an hour, which I would love to do. I like to talk. But I will say this. So while you guys are thinking it, I would like to give you mine. You're probably wondering why I've never done this on air, because my coworkers won't let me. So, no, my favorite book as a child, and it left a deep impression on me. Just deep impression on me was when I was like in 7th grade. I lived in Oklahoma, so I lived in Oklahoma in 7th and 8th grade. So 7th and 8th grade, my father bought me a copy of Watership Down. And what was interesting, keep your comments going. I can see them coming. We'll talk about everything in a second. And he got me a copy of Watership Down. I read it as a child, right? I'm 12. And I read it for what it was, a bunch of rabbits. Everybody know the story. It's a bunch of rabbits that leave the warren to head for this mythical space, which becomes Watership Down. And they flee, and they have loads of adventures and trials and trails. And they're led by 2 rabbits. One of them is more of a prophetic rabbit named Fiver. He's like a weak little rabbit, but he sees visions. It was a great book when I was a kid. I loved it. And then, of course, I mean, it left a huge impression. It was by far my favorite book. So much that I got an encyclopedia of rabbits for Christmas one year, so I could learn more about rabbits. It's pretty interesting. Then, when I got a little bit older, I became a born again Christian. I will not proselytize to you right now, I promise. No, I became a born again Christian, and I read the book again. Actually, I have this beautiful copy of the book, by the way. It's a beautiful edition. I mean, it's just lovely, gorgeous copy of it. I read it again when I was a Christian, a very fervent Christian, and I read it in the Philippines. I was a missionary in high school, and I read it there, and it really came as an allegory for me of Christianity. And so for me, I read Watership Down again, and Fiverr was a Jesus figure, and it was this really powerful book for me. Then when I left my Christian college and all my Christian training, God and I broke up. It's a long story, but we broke up, and I became pretty radical activist. I moved to Europe, became an environmental activist in Amsterdam. And by the way, I just want to add, if you are a Christian and you want to leave the church and you don't know what to do next, go to Amsterdam. It was a good move. Anyway, I go to Amsterdam, and there I read it again. And this had a very powerful, because I now saw Fiverr leading these rabbits as a revolutionary act. I mean, it was clear to me that it was an allegory to that. And again, so now they left this another impression on me. Of course, all the impressions are in me. Last, I have mental illness. I'm bipolar. Welcome to the club, right? And I was hospitalized a few times. The first time I was hospitalized, when I got out, I really needed some serious R&R. I read the book again. And there I saw Fiverr as who saw visions, of course, to lead the rabbits, as somebody with a mental illness, and he empowered me. 4 completely different takes on one children's book. I cannot say more of how much I appreciate this book was written. I will say that. I'm thinking about reading again because of this talk, and like all the other times, I'm afraid, because I don't know what the allegory is for me next, maybe as a parent or whatever. Anyway, I just wanted to share that. And real quick, I want to read to you the first sentence and the last sentence of the book, because to me, there's a reverse nature of the beginning and end of this book that to me has always been really powerful. You can indulge me in that. This first sentences are this: the primroses were over toward the edge of the wood, where the ground became open and sloped down to an old fence and a brambly ditch beyond. Only a few fading patches of pale yellow still showed among the dog's mercury and oak tree roots. Good stuff. Probably did not understand that when I was 8, but still, I got the general idea. The rabbits didn't have any flowers left to eat. And then here's the last sentence. And I'm not going to cry, but I'll be honest with you. This last sentence just... He reached the top of the bank in a single powerful leap. Hazel followed, and together they slipped away, running easily down through the woods, where the first primroses were beginning to bloom. I think that's why I'm an optimist. So let's talk about y'all's books. Okay, we got some books, a bunch of little princes. We got a bunch of little princes. Nicole writes, The Little Prince. It's such a small book, but it's so full. That book it's so full. There's no extra stuff in it. I still don't fully understand it. Like I do, but I don't. Like he's so selfish, but he's amazing. And I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm the rose. I don't know. Yeah. So I agree with you. I agree with Nicole. The Little Prince is literally stunning. Fran, who works with us, says, "Good dog, Carl." I love it. She writes so much mischief and they got away with it. There you go. That's a good lesson, to be rebellious, right? I think it was Elie Wiesel who wrote the book Night, Nobel winner, about the travails, of course, of being in Auschwitz. He wrote that the most important lesson we can teach our children is how to say no. So, good dog, Carl. I don't know. So Kay says, we didn't have too many books when I was a kid. So I had Green Eggs and Ham and Happiness is a Warm Puppy memorized. Kay, it's funny. I don't know if you didn't have books because your parents were anti-books, or you didn't have books because, you didn't have the resources necessarily to buy books. I grew up very poor. And I know that for me, books were you took it seriously if you had a book. And it's something, but also I would say, if all of humanity could memorize happiness as a warm puppy and green eggs and ham, I don't think we'd war no more. We would war no more. Okay. I think we would war no more. Of course, here's someone who says they love Watership Down. Come on, don't kiss up. I don't even know who you are. But I agree. Christina says, oh, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Christina writes that it's laid out, it's absurd, it's ridiculous, and it's perfect for the world and the universe of the 4th grade. 4th grade? You read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in the 4th grade? I remember that being a bit more advanced. Chris, real quick, remind me, what's the number? Or maybe anybody else, what's the magic number of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? I know there's a number, right? A magic number. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's a great book. That's a book that will blow. Maybe I should make my kids read that. It'll blow their minds here. What else do we got here? Where the Red Fern Grows. Oh, my wife loves that book. Where the Red Fern Grows. She says that, this is Sarah, sorry, that she grew up. Hi, Sarah. I know you, Sarah. That she grew up on a farm in southern Wisconsin. She explored the woods a lot with her cousins, rode horses, played with farm dogs and cats, and she helped raise their calves and care for animals. And for her, the relationship with the land and the animals spoke to her as a farm kid when she read the book. Wow, I am sure if the author was still with us, they would greatly appreciate that review. That's a nice review. Mark, okay, look at this one. You guys ready? This might be my favorite one. Mark said his favorite childhood book was If You Give a Mouse a Cookie. You guys remember that? Does everybody remember that one? If you give us a mouse cookie, he'll ask for this. If he does this, and it's, yeah, he's right. He said it's at a young age, you have to learn how to say no. So we have, peer pressure from rodents is pretty important. We've had a number of picture books. That's interesting. That's cool. Going way back, you guys. It's great. It's funny. My wife and I have 2 teenagers. So my wife and I were kind of cleaning up the basement kind of thing. And we couldn't get rid of so many picture books. No one's ever going to look at them, but we could not get rid of the picture books. And I have 2 nieces, and both my nieces in the last 2 months both had little boys. So we're able to send the books to them. I'm sure there's writing in it and different stuff. So that's very, very nice. Mark also wrote that he likes Kim Santiago's children's book, The Velveteen Rabbit and the Secret Garden. Someone else here talks about Alice in Wonderland. Yeah, I mean, how many of you read Alice in Wonderland when you were a kid? Because we didn't get it. I don't think we actually totally got it. And I don't think it's just a book about drugs. I think it's a book maybe written on drugs. But to me, it's such a wondrous story. You know what I mean? Also a good story to think about if you do drugs. And someone else writes that their library had a bunch of old ghost stories, like to tell the tales in the dark. It's funny that you say that. I think we're afraid. I was, when my kids were little, we were afraid for my kids to be afraid. We were afraid to scare them. And I think we're afraid of ghost stories now, but I can see how that could have a lot of meaning. Actually, somebody's typed in 42. That was the secret number of the universe in the Hitchhiker's Guide. I'll be kind of honest, I've never read it. So maybe I should read it. It's not really my kind of book, but I can do that. So you guys I get more coming in here. I'm going to take a break we're going to come back to people's books. Please put in your favorite book as a child. As soon as you participate in it, you're going to feel excited that you've done so. Let me come back to something I want to play. Let's play another one, actually. Why not? We're allowed. Let's play another one. This is from a guy who now I think he won the Pulitzer. He won the National Book Award. He's a poet. His name is Jericho Brown. And I will tell you, I've done a bunch of interviews for Special Knowledge, and he was one of my favorite interviews. I left this interview delighted. He left me delighted. I wish he was, we interview people mostly via tape. We don't see them. They're in another studio or now in their homes, and you interview them that way. And I just wanted to hug him and take him out for a drink because he was awesome. So, Nick, can you play Jericho Brown's Bookmark, please?
A black gay poet discovers sex through one of the whitest writers in American history. Want the story?
My name is Jericho Brown, and I am the author of The Tradition. My bookmark is The Witches of Eastwick by John Updike, which I think is really hilarious. But when I was a kid, this movie came out, and it had Cher and Susan Sarandon and Michelle Pfeiffer and Jack Nicholson, and it was called The Witches of Eastwick. And when we went to the movie theater, my mom and dad wouldn't let me and my sister go see it. We had to go to a different theater and see a different movie. And I was confounded for two reasons. One, it had Cher. And two, it was about witches. Certainly it was for me. So when I was a kid, I was the kind of nerd that spent a lot of time in libraries. And I came across this book on the shelf, and it said, The Witches of Eastwick. And being a kid, I thought, oh, wow, somebody turned this movie into a book. And I opened the book anywhere, and I saw the word genitals. And I was a smart kid, so I knew that if I didn't know a word, I had to go look it up. So I went to the very big dictionary that was in the center of the library, and I started turning pages until I got to the word genitals. And this is how I learned the word genitals. So I ran back to where the book was, and when I tell you, I must have been 8 or 9, I read it from cover to cover. So everything I knew about sex, I was learning from this book. So later, like much later, maybe 20 years later, I met John Updike. And the wonderful thing about that meeting was that I could go up to him and say, you know, my dad never had that talk with me, but everything I needed to know about sex education I got from you. And he looked at me and he said, you know, I think this is the best story I've ever heard about any one of my books. Thank you so much.
Jericho Brown won the National Book Award for his first book of poems called Please. His boy's guide to sex was The Witches of Eastwick by John Updike. Bookmarks are brought to you by To the Best of Our Knowledge. I'm Anne Strainchamps, and you'll find more bookmarks plus an interview with Jericho Brown at ttbook.org/bookmarks.
See what I mean? Like, they're just great. That's like a 3-minute story from a super famous guy, you know, about a book he loved. And, I just tell you, when we asked him to do that, hey, man, before you go, can you talk for 3 or 4 minutes about your favorite book? He was delighted. He was excited, and like, I don't know. I think it's interesting. I think a lot of us should, especially if we're stuck in the stupid quarantine world, right? It's like, let's have a Zoom meeting with our friends and say ahead of time, hey, let's talk about our favorite books as a kid, instead of bitching about like how hard it is and stuff. It is, I respect that. But instead, like, let's talk about our favorite kids books. That's my challenge to you after this, is like, organize that. Why not, right? Why not do it? Now, one thing I want to talk about, because it's important, is that, to the best of our knowledge, interviewed him, right? We interview him anyway. So you might as well do this. I think, like, what kind of opportunities in life are there where I can like get a double, a double win? To me, I find these a double win. I want to mention something here because I think it's important. As like I said, this is a podcast. It's called a micro podcast, which is a cool name in my opinion. And it's a micro podcast. To Best for Knowledge also is the podcast. So we're a radio show, of course. Unless you're stupid, you also want to be a podcast, of course. And this is our side sub-podcast. And I got a question. Where was it from? One of my son's friends before all this pandemic stuff. He said, what's the difference between a podcast and a radio show? And I thought, well, other than technically, there is no difference between a podcast and a radio show. But there's a few minor differences of editing from my radio show to the podcast. So then I started thinking about the kid's question, what is the difference between podcast and radio? And then I thought to myself, no, that's the wrong question. The question isn't what's the difference. Like, there's lots of ways we can ask that question in this world. The real question should be, what makes them the same, right? What makes a podcast and what makes radio the same? And what's the qualities that bind them instead of the qualities that separate them? Oh no, that's a much more interesting question, right? That I kind of want to ask myself, what is the difference? What is the same between the two? I'm on Twitter with loads and loads of people who do podcasts and radio. There's discussion recently on there of people complaining. So, well, there's enough podcasts. That podcasts are being overrun and overdone. And someone's like, really? Just like books? Like there could be as many podcasts as you want. And she said, podcasts are infinite. I was like, podcasts are infinite. I wrote that down. What does that mean? Well, I was thinking about Tolstoy, see, because that's where you go when you're on Twitter talking about podcasts. I was thinking about Tolstoy and that famous thing that he wrote, which I like, I'll read it so I get it right. All great literature is one of two stories. A man goes on a journey or a stranger comes to town. We've been taught that in college, English classes, for literature classes for years. I don't like that quote. I don't believe it. I don't buy it. I think that the human story, right? It's universal. It's infinite. It's infinite. So I think we should make as many podcasts as we want. There are not too many. Now, I'm going to go back to the question, of course, what is the difference or what is the same between podcast and radio? Like anything else, you could say, what is news? Is Fox News news? Is the Wall Street Journal, the Guardian? What is news? Is the Manila Press? What are different news sources? What is news? Well, it's how people define for what it is. But the thing is, what makes it good? What is the stuff that works? For what we do, I think public radio has always been this higher level of audio where they've been taking it very seriously for years and years. And they've been right up against talk radio, that's left wing and right wing kind of extremism, pop music, and still down the line, public radio. I think it's the same for podcasts. Right before I did this, I looked up over the last 5 years what the most popular, most downloaded podcasts were. And the top 10, they're pretty dominated by public radio, actually. Public radio shows or shows that are affiliated with public radio that made me feel proud. My show wasn't in the top 10. Maybe it's in the top 20, I'm not sure, but it wasn't in the top 10. And it made me realize that public radio can also be public podcasting. And it's kind of what you bring to it. You know what I mean? It's just what you bring to it. So I think that was just a little thing I wanted to observe. Well, let's look at some more of your books. I see them flying up here. We got Little Women as a kid's book. You read that as a kid. Good. A lot of the kids' book, like I said, what's your favorite kids' book? People are like doing Tolstoy. I'm like, come on, really? But I guess they did. That was from Leslie. Karen, she loved A.A. Milne. A.A. Milne, God, Winnie the Pooh. That's some deep business, man. And he meant that to be deep business. Someone else wrote Charlotte's Web. I don't know how your parents are out there, but if you remember when you're a kid, read Charlotte's Web, you go watch them, cute, curled up, reading the book, and you know she's gonna die, and you're like, oh, I don't know did I ruin that for anyone? I didn't mean to, but you just know she's gonna die, and I think that's my first understanding of death was that book. Who else do we got? Jen. Oh, my neighbor. Hey, my neighbor Jen. She says she likes The Great Escape or The Sewer Story. She was obsessed with this picture book when she was a kid. She thinks about it all the time. Here, she tells you what it's about. I like this. Baby alligators. Okay, it's a good start. Baby alligators are kidnapped in Florida. They're taken to New York to be pets for rich people. They're flushed down the toilet when they're too big. The alligators are forced to escape by dressing as humans and chartering a plane to fly home. She writes that it's a book about absurdity and resistance. Boom. See, I know Jen, right? And so if I start my little group, which I'm going to do now, of people coming in and talking about their favorite kids book, we'd all be like checking her out. Oh my gosh, someone's typing these for me, and that story about Jen got many, many likes. So that's good for people listening. I have a question, and maybe people can just chime in on this for these books. So many of the great books became animated pieces. Like I remember Watership Down was a piece of French animation for years, and I didn't like it. I really didn't. It almost ruined the book for me that it was animation. So all these great things we're talking about, most of them become movies. Though I will say the mouse with the cookie, what the hell was that one again? Sorry, I forgot the name of the one with the mouse and the cookie. If you gave a mouse a cookie, that has not ever become a film. I think that's really, really sad. That's really, really sad. I have to keep a track on time here because I'm just talking away. I want to talk about back to It's Best for Knowledge because I want to tie it in to Bookmarks. As you know, it's a national radio program, which I think a lot of people are proud of. It's made here. Oh, I only have 5 minutes left. Okay, so I should really, really hurry up. There's two things we work under. There's two ideas that we believe in. One is an idea of awe and wonder, probably the greatest words in the English language. The other one is this idea of intelligent optimism. When we do a Bookmarks series coming up, like I have coming up, we also add a show to it, a broadcast show that we do to kind of put before the Bookmarks series. And I'm working on that show right now, and I'm doing a show on Black girl magic. And to me, different guests talking about Black girls and how that, for YA books, Black girl magic and YA books. And that's this idea of intelligent optimism. And I think that if you think about those two ideas, intelligent optimism and on wonder, I think you could live under that, or hell, you could start a cult under those ideas. As I'm reading these books and talking to these women and looking up the idea of Black girl magic in YA literature, I didn't know that as a subgenre on any level, and now I'm touched by its optimism. Because you don't write a kid's book. Like dystopia was in, right? Remember dystopia? We kind of live in one now. Nobody wants to read a goddamn dystopia. So I like that it's going another way. I do want to play one more. I know I only have a couple minutes left, so I want to play one more real quick that I love. It's from Philip Pullman, and a lot of you know Philip Pullman. Is like, he's the man right now. He's got the HBO series. He's got the book. And this bookmark is my favorite bookmark. So real quick, let's, Nick, can you play Philip Pullman?
Hello there. I'm Philip Pullman. I'm the author of His Dark Materials, currently being shown on television, and of a new series of books called The Book of Dust.
Millions of children have read and loved Philip Pullman's books. But when he was a child, the age of his famous protagonist, Lyra Belacqua, what book did he love most? Welcome to Bookmarks.
I'm going to talk about a book that was a big influence on me, which I first encountered at the age of, about 9. I was 9 years old. And it was a little pocket atlas, an atlas of the world, which I could put in my pocket of my blazer that I wore to school. And I took it everywhere with me because it absolutely fascinated me. I was fascinated by the look of my own country, England, looking up the town where I was born, Norwich in East Anglia, and all around the coast that I knew, and looking at all the European countries and wondering what it would be like to go to Italy or to go to Germany or to go to France. I had spent quite a lot of my childhood traveling around the world because my father and then my stepfather were both in the Royal Air Force. And in those days, the RAF sent its pilots and its personnel to, well, what was then the Empire, still the British Empire. So I'd spent part of my childhood in Africa, Southern Africa, and part in Australia. And it was nice to look at the map in my little pocket atlas and see where we used to live and all the places I'd been to. One of my favourite pages was the map that covered New England. And I went through this almost with a magnifying glass. So many towns all crowded together, and so many of them had English names. There was a Norwich there was an Oxford there, and that was fascinating. And there were towns with kind of names that could only have come from another country. One of them I was fascinated by was the town of Oconomowoc in Wisconsin. Many years later, I found myself actually driving through Oconomowoc. I still have that little pocket atlas. Some of it's out of date now because the names of some countries have changed and some borders have changed. Although the physical geography of the world remains more or less the same, we now know more about it, and I can see that the Arctic ice, for example, doesn't cover as large a space as it used to. So the world is changing, but I still have my little atlas, and although I use mainly now, for reference while I'm writing, I use a very big atlas which I can spread out on the desk and clear everything out of the way and examine. I still cherish that little atlas because it was a book that helped me, when I was a child, imagine faraway places that I still haven't been to.
The Pocket Atlas. Do they still make those? Philip Pullman is the author of the fantasy trilogy His Dark Materials. The first volume is called The Golden Compass. If you haven't read it, maybe you saw it on HBO recently. I'm Anne Strange-Champs. You can hear Philip Pullman talk about the series and find more bookmarks on To the Best of Our Knowledge. Look for us at ttbook.org/bookmarks.
PRX.
Wow. I mean, God, it's amazing. I was talking about, intelligent optimism and on wonder. I mean, there you go. It feels amazing. I'm going to wrap up, but I want to say a few things. One, of course, soon our new podcast series will come out. You can go online and listen to the last couple of months. They're cool. They're all the same idea. And, it's going to come out, and the Black Girl Magic Show is going to be coming out soon. And I certainly enjoy you. I would enjoy it if you would check those out. But I want to leave you with something else. And I'd mentioned it earlier, but I want to leave it with you. I was going to ask everybody to read a children's book, one they've thought about today, and just for yourself. But I think we're all in our heads, right? Because of the pandemic, and it can be really tricky. Instead, like I said, get a Zoom meeting, right? Get 3 or 4 or 5, whatever friends together in that meeting and talk about your favorite kid's book. You don't have to read their books if you don't want, but just talk about them because it feels good. I don't feel bad hearing Anne Lamott or any of these people. It makes me feel good in my soul, man. We could all use some good in our souls. So I challenge you to do that. I'm easy to find, Best for Knowledge, my email or whatever. Tell me about it. I would love to hear about your experience. I'm going to organize a couple of friends to do it now. And I'd like to hear about your experience. Why not? Why not read a kid's book in the midst of what we're dealing with right now? Hey, thank you very, very much. There's so many texts now coming in. My God, just so much. Well, thank you very much for being a part of this today. I hope you like our podcast. I hope you like the show. And I hope you talk to your friends about kids' books, or your kids about kids' books, or yourself. And thank you very much. And have a wonderful day, and I hope it's been better because of this. Bye-bye.